Good afternoon, everybody. Ryan Leary here from Recruiting Daily. Welcome to the webinar today. We've got a great webinar lined up today. It's called Leaving Your Mark, Candidate Experience and Employer Brand. We have a couple things to cover before we get kicked off. I'll go through a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll get you introduced to the two presenters today. And we've got a lively conversation, and I know they're not on mute. Surprised they're being so quiet. But we just had some really lively conversation in the back end, so I know it's going to carry over here. Before we kick off, I definitely want to give a huge thank you to the team over at Greenhouse. They are an amazing group of people. We've worked with them a bunch. You've seen us work with them a bunch, and they are the supporter for today's webinar. If for some reason you're not familiar with Greenhouse, go ahead and check them out. It's greenhouse.io. Essentially, they're an ATS, and they've got a lot of different products in recruiting, inclusion, onboarding, CRM. They've got a really nice events app that you'll really like if you have apps. Good thing about one of the many good things about Greenhouse, they offer the product at 3 different tiers. So there are sizes for everybody. If you're in the market and you need some guidance or help, definitely check them out. So before we get into the agenda and kick it over to the speakers, this is an open dialogue today. What that means is we want you to ask questions. So on the right-hand side of your panel, you'll see a questions area there. So go ahead and enter in any of your questions, any questions you have at any time. We will break in. We're not going to hold questions to the end, so we will break in at the appropriate time and ask those questions. So please ask away, and we will gather those in real time. So let's kick off. Let's get you everyone introduced to the speakers today. We've got two very well-known speakers. We've got Mr. Tincup, who serves as president over here at Recruiting Daily, and we've got Sally, who is head of TA at, is it Yotpo?
Yotpo.
Yotpo.
You're real close, though.
I know, almost. So
Don't
guys,
worry.
I guess Tincup, I'll pass it off to you and let you take it from here. I'll break in with any questions.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and say Sally. We're going to call Sally B because that's how we talked in prep as Sally B. Sally B's got a fantastic story of how she sees the candidate experience and also how she sees competitive advantage in recruiting. So this is going to be a really, really fun and probably fast webinar. Sally and I have joked about how much we're actually going to get through the webinar because we both talk a lot and joke a lot. So we will try to get through it all. But again, like Ryan said, and it really is important. Y'all the audience kind of makes, to some degree, kind of makes these webinars or live chats or podcasts or fireside chats. Y'all are the ones that kind of make these things important. And even better because you ask questions that we weren't thinking about. So as we talk and as we kind of go through bits, please just jot down the question, throw it into the system, and Ryan will then interject and ask Sally B or myself or both of us to answer. So Sally B, let's get started.
Let's do it.
Right.
And first, just to give you guys a little bit of background, I am, yes, the head of talent at Yotpo, and I've been here for about 2.5 years. I was lucky enough to actually work with Yotpo before I even joined the company. So before that, I was at Vets Recruiting, which is an agency some of you are probably familiar with. And I was one of the first 6 or so employees in New York with Vets Recruiting. Yotpo had been a client of mine and a company that I saw a lot of promise in, particularly with its leaders and the way that it viewed candidates. So I made that move over here, have helped to build out all the recruitment strategy here, and I'm very grateful for the fact that I had that time in agency beforehand, because a lot of what you'll learn today and a lot of what we've put into place here is influenced by all the positive and negative candidate experiences that I saw while in agency. And we were able to do what I hope is quite different than all the negative ones here at Yotpo as a result of that. So it's a little background on myself.
We have a question.
You got it. Already, let's go.
Yes.
How do you, let's just start off with the question and see if it doesn't match, we'll come back to it. But how do you manage candidates that do not respond to emails, since providing a great candidate experience is important?
So I want to make sure I answer it correctly. So like in-mails on LinkedIn, or like emails like they've already applied to the company, they've already demonstrated interest? Because that would probably be handled a little bit differently. Or should I just provide
So
both?
Daisy, if you're hearing that, go ahead and add that in the clarification. Oh, these are people who have demonstrated interest, and then we'll
Oh,
jump into
great.
the slide there. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. And who are not responding to the emails. Um, well, that is an interesting choice because they've already provided some sort of excitement about it. Okay, so when it comes to folks who are in that position, I like to assume that it's a pretty simple mistake, that it might be in spam, or they might be super
Sure.
busy and with a really full inbox like me. Um, it's all about follow up, and follow up needs to start real nice. So you come in initially with like, hey, just following up, literally the same exact message, right? After that, it would be more of, hey, I haven't heard back from you. These are the things about your profile that really stood out to me that made it so that I was interested in having a call in the first place. Let me know if this is something you're still interested in. I probably do one more tag after that for someone who is inbound, and say something along the lines of like, hey, we have some people who are moving through process and are further along. Your background is still one that's interesting to me, but I haven't heard back from you. If you're uninterested, let me know. No problem. Hopefully you found another role, but let me know over the next couple of days. And then
Yeah.
you hear nothing, and you go ahead and I usually would reject no send at that point.
The only other thing I would add to that is trying different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
So if email for whatever reason is broken, well, let's just say I think that's probably a case of it going into promotions or spam or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, then call the person or text the person.
Oh, for an
Or,
all-star, you bet. For
right,
most people, probably not, but for an all-star, no question. Pick up
right.
the phone or text.
Do
Yeah.
something, just do something different just to see if this is medium specific. If it's
Yeah.
medium and they're interested, but somehow the medium has gotten in the way, well then let's change mediums. And I've seen recruiters go all the way to actually using stationery and cards and just say, hey, I got your email. I know that you're interested. You look fantastic. Love to talk with you. Let me give you my cell number. And let's try something different. Let's get out of the medium that maybe is not working for us and try something different.
I'm all about picking up the phone. Again, learned in agency. Always pick up
Yeah.
the phone if you
When
can.
you, a quick question, when you
Yeah.
came over, because your story about being at the agency and then coming internal, I think that
Yeah.
that happens. We know that happens. Was there anything there already, like process wise or technology wise or people wise? Was there anything already kind of that you had to inherit when you first came in?
Well, when it comes to a direct team, there was nobody, like no recruiters that I had to inherit. We gratefully had Greenhouse already, Greenhouse plug. We had that already, but it wasn't really being utilized correctly. In fact, there were some really funny things, like there were two different SDR roles that were live simultaneously, and one was called SDR and one was called sales development representative. And we had many people we'd hired who were in the system at application stage and hadn't been touched, right? So like at least I had something to go through and play with. And that's a whole other thing, like how I managed that, which I don't know if any of you care to hear. But that took a while to like manage, what of this do I actually keep and what of this do I dispose of? But what I came into in the way of the team, and one of the big reasons why I came over, was I came to a company where the CEO, well, both co-founders, honestly, and the VP of sales and the head of operations, who I reported to, really, 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 really took interviewing seriously. Like they might not have a very specific thing in place. They absolutely did not, but they were really serious about who they hired. And when you start with that core, you can build anything.
Well, tell us about this candidate experience that you've built.
Perfect. We're jumping into the slide. Cool. So as you all can see here, you have the few bullets that we'll dig into in more depth. But since I've been here, we've, of course, and I'm sure all of you in talent have done the same, we've changed our process, and we've changed exactly how we interview candidates a number of times to sort of see what exactly works best. And Tincup actually pointed this out to me, and it really is the case. Sort of what we focus on as a company at Yapo, which is gathering user feedback and making changes accordingly. That is the case for a candidate experience as well. So when you think about what candidates really have a hard time with when they're interviewing at companies, one of the big things is just making the time. A lot of people feel really guilty sneaking out at lunch to go have a phone call, or, you know, coming out and doing a number of on-sites in order to make a decision, but they need to have that time. The company needs the time to make an informed decision. The candidate needs the time to make an informed decision. So we wanted to create a process in which not only could we limit the number of on-sites that occurred so that you could literally just take one sick day or one half day, but we also wanted to ensure that candidates received feedback as quickly as possible. Often if you're interviewing at a lot of companies, and you want to know sooner than later whether you got the job or not. So my team, from the initial application, really shoots to get back to people in between 1 day's time and 1 week's time. And then once the process is actually moving, we provide feedback after every interview within 1 to 2 days about whether you're moving forward or not. And we also provide a final answer around whether you have the job or not within 48 hours after you're on site. So this is all stuff that we created and we've been trying over the past few months, which have been panning out really well for us.
So multiple people interviewing. How do you manage the process of 5 different people, let's just say, interviewing the same candidate and not wasting their time and not having them answer the same questions, and even some of the snafus that happen with just 5 people interviewing the same candidate?
So we talked a lot about that, and I'm sure anybody in talent has had that moment where either you go into a wrap-up and you find out that, yeah, well, like Josh and Mike both asked me this question, or I heard this question a number of times, or like even worse, you're interviewing the candidate and you ask a question and they're like, oh yeah, well, Danielle actually already asked me that question and here's my answer. It's just like such a gut punch, because that's just not the best use of anybody's time, right? They don't need to regurgitate the same thing over and over again. It's the reason why I am adamantly opposed to anybody ever asking a candidate to like walk them through their resume. You should have done enough research on the resume to ask an informed conversation based on what you've read already. But what we've done to ensure that it doesn't happen very often, because it will happen, right? So it's human nature, is to ensure that everybody in an interview process has a purpose. This is something Tincup and I spoke a bit about, in that there are a lot of companies where people put people in the interview process because they're an important person at the company, or because they're a good gauge of character, right? And if you do that, and if you work with a lot of great people, which we all hope we do, that interview process can quickly become 5 on-sites long. It can become 7 hours long, right? You just keep plugging people in. And that's not a good use of anyone's time, because people haven't prepared properly, and also that's a poor candidate experience in general. So what we do is we really map out and continue to build on this. We have meetings once a month around what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. We build out the certain things that need to be evaluated in candidates, where people have had success, where we've seen failure in the past. We choose a core group of people who are able to actually test for those things. And people are not given exact questions to ask. I'm not going to say you have to go in and ask these 5 questions, but they're given a purpose. You're going to go in this interview and you're going to figure out whether this person actually has the ability to, you know, an easy one is like do the job, but like, what does that mean? It's like, does this person have the grit? Is this person creative enough to come up with the strategies? And that's something we also spoke a lot about, is the role that peers play in that sort of interview, which we do a little bit differently. We have our peers actually turn the conversation around. And so if you're interviewing for a CSM job and a CSM goes in to interview with you, he or she is going to start it off by saying, this is your time to interview me. We really want to use this opportunity for you to ask me all the questions that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking a manager, questions that maybe you wouldn't usually ask during an interview process. And because that's usually jarring to candidates, they then offer up, here's an example of something I wish I had asked. I wish I'd known what my manager's weaknesses are. I wish I'd known what the turnover rate was here. I wish I'd known what it is people do get fired for, right? The types of things that no one really wants to ask, but everybody wants to know. We ensure they have an opportunity to have that too.
There's two notes in there that we've talked about, and I like a lot. One is giving people a role. If you're going to be in the interview, you have to have a role. And we even talked the other day about those roles being or potentially being value based. So if you have 8 values that are core to the business, then and 8 people that are going to be in those interviews, each one of them gets to go in and really just kind of drill in on the value, just to make sure that that person really fits the values, which I think is really an interesting way to interview instead of talking about competencies and skills and fit and culture and all this other stuff. It is kind of talking about it, but it's talking about it specific to the values. The other thing you mentioned, which I thought was really brilliant, was giving the candidate a list of questions, 3 to 5 questions of questions you would like to have asked when you interviewed for the job. Like literally, and I'm imagining in my head, like person walks in and I'm interviewing and me handing them a piece of paper and go, these are the 5 questions I wish I would have asked when I was in that chair. So I know you have questions. Sure, you're prepared. Here's my questions in case you want to use those as well, but fire away. I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to ask me some questions. Let's fire away. Go ahead.
It gives the candidate an idea of what they're allowed to ask, right? I think that's often where the big pause is. It's like, is this a trap? Am I going to ask about hours? And then you're going to go tell my manager I asked about hours. And then you're going to worry about my commitment, right? Like there are all these things that very understandably, based on negative experiences elsewhere or what have you, right? Someone becomes concerned. So if you have the other person in the room saying like, here are questions I wish I asked, and if you ask me the questions, I'll answer them honestly, that helps people, and they have to ask one, right? Like they have to at least ask one to see that they'll actually give them a candid answer. But the second you begin to have this conversation and this dialogue where the person at the current company is giving you this insight you don't hear from other interviewers, you begin to say, okay, like this is a real thing. Like he or she's actually going to answer the things that I'm a little afraid to ask.
Yeah, it's 2 things real quick. One is how do you know that you're doing the candidate experience the right way? Meaning, how do you know that you've achieved? Is it surveying the candidates? Is it talking to the interviewers? Is it people that you've hired 6 months later and getting feedback from them? Like, how do you know when you're doing it correctly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It kind of has to be a bit of all those things, right? We're in the process of building out an even stronger onboarding process when it comes to the evaluations we have early on. So like a 30, 60, 90 sort of recap with candidates. That 30-day check-in we already do does include this component of, what about your experience was positive? What about it wasn't? And we also, part of it is just hearing it from the candidate firsthand, right? Like part of it is you have a wrap up with them at the end and they say to you, I've never had an interview where people were so honest. Like, I just actually think I know what I'm getting myself into. You hear it firsthand. Another, which is a little kooky, is when I give offers, when my team gives offers, before we actually get to the portion where we've told them they're getting an offer, this is someone who's been through a really long process, right? Or long in my opinion, because we have that 3 to 4 hour on site. They've gone through a lot. They've really dedicated a lot of time and energy. And before that offer is given, we say we'd really, really appreciate feedback from you around what in this process was very positive, but also what was less positive. What do you wish you had more insight into? Who do you wish you had more time with? It's not going to be held against you, which, I just hope they'll believe. And, sometimes people do and sometimes people don't, let's be honest, right? Like they're waiting for an offer or not.
Sure.
So they're a little distracted, but people will say to you, I really wish I'd had a chance to go get something to eat partway through, right? Or I really wish I'd had a bit more time with Matt because we went over the business acumen assessment, and I feel like there's a lot more I could have learned from him in that time, and it seemed really limited, right? Like, people will actually share this insight, and we say to them it's with the purpose of improving candidate experience moving forward.
Right.
Also, just a little tidbit for Glassdoor stuff, when we interview candidates and they've had a really positive experience, but they accept the job elsewhere, like we make them an offer, we really, really like them, and they go somewhere else, we ask them to write a review about their interview experience. We say, you're saying to us you really loved this process, you're saying you loved these people, this other opportunity made more sense for you. It would be really, really helpful for us if you went and you wrote that online and showed other people who are interested in maybe exploring this opportunity that this is a place where they'll have an enjoyable process.
That's one of the biggest compliments a recruiter can get is, I didn't get the job, but I still love y'all.
Yeah.
Like, that's the big, that's something we all achieve, or so what we all strive for is getting to the place where someone didn't get the gig and still loves us for.
Oh, those are the best ones. Like the example I just gave you was someone who did get the job and turned us down, but we do get Glassdoor reviews from people who didn't get the job, and that's when you were like, oh, it did it right.
Yeah, it worked. It really worked.
They loved it.
Was that Sally Field? You love me. You really, really.
Yeah, that's how you feel.
Ryan's, of course, already advanced the slide to process.
Yeah, he's like, let's talk about the reasons. Yes.
Because he knew that we were not going to be able to make it through the first slide. So, okay.
Right.
Why the
we
process?
Talked a bit about this already, right? Like, is there anything on this specific slide that you think we should dig more into, Tincup?
No, the thing about scheduling and time is all about managing expectations, right? Mm-hmm. So part of the candidate experience that we fail at, generally speaking, is we don't let people know what's coming next. Like, again, in that scenario where you have the people that are going to interview based on values and they're going to give you a list of questions that they would have asked, wouldn't it be nice if we tell people that? Like, hey, this is going to be the bit. Bob is going to come in and talk to you a little bit about integrity. And he's going to ask you a bunch of probative questions about integrity. And he's also going to give you some questions that he would have liked to have asked while he went through this process. So, like, just letting people know what's next in scheduling and time, I think that goes to making your candidate experience that much better.
Right. And Ryan, if you go to the next slide, it's just that big one that's like a 3 to 4 hour on-site. Isn't that a poor candidate experience? And I would be lying if I told you that that is not overwhelming to people. It is countless times that I've sat down with candidates at the end and they've said to me, I saw it was going to be 4 hours. And I was like, holy crap, that is a very long interview. But it's almost always followed up with, but it's gone by so quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And it's what you just mentioned before, like, you have to actually let them know what that time is going to be. Like, why the hell do I have a 4 hour interview? Well, you have a 4 hour interview because you're going to meet with these people. And we send a list and we say, you're meeting from 3 to 3:30 with Sherry, and you're meeting from 3:30 to 4:15 with Ken, and you're meeting with Travis, and you're meeting with Matt, right? And you lay it out with their full names. And some people choose, Tincup and I spoke a bit about this, to include additional information, like you hyperlink their name to their LinkedIn or their Instagram or whatever. I'm a big fan of giving the name, but I'm also hiring a ton of salespeople. And if you aren't going to do your due diligence when I gave you the name of the person you're meeting, like, that's on you and demonstrates whether you're going to be good at this job. But I do make sure everyone has all those names and who they're meeting with. And then, as we've already previously discussed, everyone has that different purpose. And if you successfully do that and you provide unique aspects like that peer interview and like the time that we have on the floor, something we offer with many of our roles is time to sit on the floor alongside a person who would be your peer, to see the different dashboards they look at every day, to look at the different tools they utilize for outreach or management of accounts, to listen to the calls happening around you, hearing one person successfully close a deal and us ring a bell or hit the gong while the person behind them gets hung up on, right? For someone to sit for 30 minutes and experience that, combined with these purposeful meetings with people ranging from the person they would roll right up to the person who manages that person, it really gives them this ability to ask all the questions they could possibly have and to get a genuine feel for what this life would actually be like working at this company.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a great conversation about the preparation part because I like giving people everything. Just here's everything. You're going to be meeting with Bob. Bob's a Virgo. He grew up in Toledo. He went to Dayton.
He's particularly fond of hamsters.
He's particularly he does needlework. Anyhow, so like give it. I like giving them everything: Instagram account, Twitter, Facebook, just everything, and just to see if they'll go through it and find all the things that they want to find. But your point is, that you made about salespeople is if they're so lazy that you give them a name and they don't go and do their research, then they're telling you that they're lazy, which I think
And
is a great indicator.
and managers notice, right? Like, 'cause it can go either way. Of course, they notice if you have no clue who they are.
That's right.
But they also notice, like, we recently brought in a candidate, and one of the hiring managers G-chatted me and was like, I already love him. And I was like, what? Like, do you like his profile? Like, what? He's like, he has been stalking me for 4 days. Like, he has looked at my profile every day for 4 days. Like,
Yep.
he's obviously doing his due diligence. So people notice, right? They notice when you take that extra leap and that you should be doing, at least if you're a salesperson. I mean, I would argue for all, but that's my specialty. So we'll stick with that.
I had a candidate one time bring me, and it was after the interview. The interview was already kind of wrapped up. We're shaking hands. We're talking. He's like, oh, by the way, I brought you something. And he brought me a Bob Marley and the Wailers concert T-shirt signed by Bob Marley.
Whoa.
Right, and I was a huge fan, and he would have only have known that because of Pandora and Spotify and all these other things that he knew that I was that big of a fan. I'm like, you know
And
what?
you handed him an offer on the spot.
Right then, you are hired. I don't care if you can do the job or not.
I really disliked you 10 minutes ago, but now I think you've got some promise.
You're in. You, sir, are in the boat.
That's how it works.
The day in the life bit, especially in a long process like that. One of the things that I love about the day in a life in a long process like 3 or 4 hours is it's hard to be on for that long.
Yes, it is.
Like anybody can be on for like 30 minutes. Like I'm gonna be, I'm on, jacked up 5-hour energy. I'm on. But over the course of a longer day, you kind of settle into your true self. And one of the things that I like is that day in the life, putting them next to people and letting them see the job, and also letting them see that you're not perfect. The company's not perfect. This is kind of like, okay, we're going to bend transparency and authenticity. Oh, shit, I can't say it.
Yeah,
Cinnamon. Cinnamon. I dreamed last night. This is off topic for just a moment, but do robots have safe words?
I don't know.
Safe? All right. Anyhow, so
yes.
Right. That's how my mind works. So the bit is like you're allowing them to see you as a company as you truly are, which warts and all, because it's going to come out. The longer they're there behind the veil, it's going to come out.
Right.
And so you get to see them as they start to wax into kind of their normal self and not their on self. And they get to see you and maybe some not so perfect ways. So there's some other benefits to a longer process behind the veil.
And when we talk about like this honesty component, right? Because that's sort of what you're speaking to already, and that's the slide, right? So I think that it really, like, there are a number of steps that have to exist for this to actually happen, right? Like, for candidates to feel that you've been honest and genuine the whole time, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It only happens if you've really, really hit home with all of your hiring managers that this is the expectation and that this is the priority. So whenever we go through interview training, whether it's an SDR who's going to be doing a peer interview, whether it's a manager, a really, really big thing that we hit home time and time again, and that we remind people of, is how important this honesty is. Because if you aren't honest, which unfortunately a lot of companies aren't, and I get it, right? Like, you have this candidate coming in who is a rock star, right? You have this person coming in that has every single box that you hoped to tick, and you want to hire her. And when you want to hire someone, you want to show them the beautiful world that is your company. It's understandable. You need to make the hire, and this is the best person. But if you demonstrate this reality that isn't the reality, that person quits in 3 months, or that person's a miserable person at your company, perhaps, right? And they have this negative energy that, like, because they won't leave, bleeds out into the rest of the team, and they feel it too. So there's that advantage, right? That, like, if you are truly honest, you give candidates the opportunity to weigh whether the pros outweigh the cons for them with their needs and what they want in their future. And it's one of those things where your managers actually have to see it before they believe it, right? You can tell them it's okay time and time again, but it isn't until the managers themselves hear the responses they get from candidates, where they're responding in the moment about, wow, I really appreciate you being that candid with me, that they understand that it is received well. And that's a really easy segue to another thing we do really, that's, I think, is very, very unique. And we talked about this Tincup with the honesty part, is you can be honest to people during the interview process, but I believe you should also be honest with people after the interview process. And we know there are a lot of companies, whether it's because of bandwidth or what have you, that sometimes never even tell a candidate they're rejected, right? They can have an interview and never hear back ever again. And this is something that is very, very common. And people, as a result of it, first of all, feel like shit. Like, let's be honest, no one wants to be in that situation. And also, how does that person ever improve? How can that person ever know what he or she did wrong in their interview if they don't have some sort of insight into what happened? So that other piece of scary honesty that for everyone I've ever trained on my team has been like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It's going to be so horrible, but it goes well 19 out of 20 times, is if we reject a candidate, in their rejection email, we give them the option to receive feedback. If you want to know why we did not move forward with your candidacy, let us know. We'll set up a call. And we have a candid conversation with any candidate who wants it to say, here are the things you said that suggested you have not respected your previous managers. That's obviously a big problem, right? Like, we do not feel comfortable bringing you into our organization when we worry that you've not respected every manager you've had previously, right? You tell them what they said, you tell them what they did, and why it led you to a specific conclusion. And with that knowledge, people are able to do better and find themselves a strong home. And again, it sounds horrifying, but people actually really appreciate it.
Well, it's karma too. I mean, on some level, no one likes to be lied to. News at 11.
Or ghosted.
So like, I kind of tend to tell people about the good things and kind of sell them on the good things. It's like, okay, here's some of the good things. And then I try to scare the shit out of them. So I've got, again, yet another unique strategy here, is I want to then go into the dark places. Like, you know what? We almost had to file bankruptcy like 2 years ago. Shit was crazy. Like, we were mismanaging money and it was out of control and we were spending it in really inappropriate ways. But, we got it back together. We hired a CFO and, we're better now. But, I don't want you to think that we're perfect, because if you come in and you think that we're perfect and then you find out that we're indeed not perfect, then you're going to think that I lied to you. And I don't want you to ever think that I lied to you. I want to tell you the positive, and I want to tell you the negative as well. And if you're afraid of the negative, then it's better for you to be afraid of the negative and say no than for you to say yes and then find that stuff out later.
And there are two important negatives, right? There's the negative you just said, which is, the aspects of the company that are scary, the aspects of the role that are scary, and you can weave those into conversation and really push it, right, to ensure that they understand that side of the role. But then there's also the ugly honesty of calling them out when they've said something that doesn't actually align with the role, right? An easy example is I'm interviewing someone for an SDR role, and they tell me that one of the key reasons they dislike their current role is because it's too monotonous. I'm doing too much of the same thing. And that is your moment, and you're like the time that you should, as a hiring manager, say, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The role you are currently interviewing for is a lot of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want this job? If that's something that you really don't like about your current position, why would you come to a new place to experience the same thing? And people really appreciate it.
I think Ryan's trying to.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. We've got a bunch of questions here. One came in that's pertinent right now. We missed a bunch from earlier, so we'll go back to those in a bit.
We talk a lot. I'm sorry, guys.
But the one that just came in says, are you not afraid of that resulting in a potential lawsuit?
It's funny because people ask me that, and I mean, like, enough people have asked me that, like, maybe I should be concerned about it, right? I struggle to understand how a lawsuit would happen around this if the reasoning you're giving them is something that they truly said or did, right? And that's, I mean, there comes the importance of greenhouse, right? And this is something that I really have to thoroughly train managers on, and like often, and I know this is not the case at a lot of companies, but my managers really do put in specific examples of things people said and did in their interview process. And that's the feedback I give. There's no like, you weren't a culture fit. There's no, anything like that. It's these were the things you said and did that led to this conclusion, like black and white.
And you're staying away from protected class stuff, and you're staying away from biases, obvious biases that you would never talk about. Hopefully you'd never have, but if you did, you would never talk about. So some of it's common sense as well.
Exactly.
So now we have another question, and this is going back to feedback, I'm assuming, and managing that process. So for the topics we're talking about, it sounds really great. I would love to implement these ideas and process. Our recruiters have 25 plus recs managing 200 plus candidates at a time. How can we do these things at scale? We
do it at that scale. So we're managing the like peak we were at just about a month ago is we had 32 open roles in New York, and I have 2 recruiters, and 16 of those were like one-off roles, right? Which we all know are like hyper demanding when you have this like one-off role versus like 5 SDRs, right? It sounds ominous. I know it sounds ominous, but it's and it is ominous, right? Like the first portion of it really sucks. Like coming in and trying to implement these things and demonstrate for people why it's important is a very daunting task, but it becomes habit. It becomes just part of your routine. And with a feedback call, it's a very understandable thing to think like that's going to be really overwhelming. Feedback calls at the most are 15 minutes, and that is far and few between. A feedback call typically takes about 5 minutes, and a good way to like do that is you block off like 4 to 5 one day and do 3 feedback calls or like 4 feedback calls, right? You just knock them out like that because it's so tangible that when a candidate hears it, they're like, oh, yeah, I see why that came across that way. And every once in a while, someone will want coaching, and that's when it's a 15-minute one. But it sounds like it'll take longer than it does. The training is what takes the longest part. But then after the training, it just becomes everyone's habit, right?
Are we giving candidate calls to or feedback calls to everybody that was spoken with, or just those that are coming in for
the ones that asked for it?
Yeah, that could be a phone call and that could be an on-site. And not everybody will ask for feedback, right? But yeah, even if you had a phone call, if I just rejected your resume, you're obviously not having a feedback call, right? But even if you had a phone call through a technical, through an on-site, those people all get that option.
So the things that I would say is it's the will to, the want to, commitment, it's dedication, and you got to prioritize it as important over some of the other things that you might be doing. Some people are going to be on that boat, and some people aren't, and that's just going to be life. Some of the people that aren't on the boat, hopefully they leave. The second thing I would say is a saleswoman mantra is 2 things: never lie, and you always want to sell to the person for the rest of your life. So one of the reasons that you give feedback to people, to candidates, isn't just altruistic. It's
Mhm.
it's also that you want to keep in touch with that candidate, because
Exactly.
maybe this little thing that happens, you give them some feedback, they go on 2, 3 years into their career and they're really much better, and you're the one that gave them some good feedback. You can call that person again and say, hey, I've been keeping track of you. You look like you're doing really great. I have an opening. Love to talk with you about it. And because you took the time to give them feedback, you now have an open door with them.
And Tincup, I will say to you, I actually had someone ask me, I wonder if he's listening right now. I had someone ask me yesterday, like, if I had one key takeaway of like why I've been as successful as I have as a recruiter and like what that one thing would be. It is this honesty component. And that
Hmm.
can be feedback, or that can be when I was back at Betts, I had candidates that would have two offers on the table, and one was from me, from a Betts like company, and one was outside, and they would talk through with me like, here are the pros and cons of each of these, and this is how I'm weighing them. And if that other company made more sense, I would tell them it made more sense.
Try it. Try it.
And that lost me money. I did not have a base salary, right? Like that lost me money,
No, it didn't.
obviously,
No, it didn't.
but it didn't. Yeah, it lost me money then,
That's
right?
right.
But this is someone I created a relationship with. And that's someone that knew if they were looking again 2 years later, they could come to me. If they had a friend who was looking or a report who was looking, they could come to me too. And I was going to be honest about where they'd be happy, because that's the end goal, right? Like we do this to help people find jobs where they're happy. And you don't want to put someone in a situation where they're not going to have that option or where they're going to lose that opportunity. Like the whole reason we do it, right?
So quick aside story. 100 years ago, I was managing hardware department for a Walmart, and Sam Walton was in my store, and he was in my department, and he told me, he said, William, if a customer comes in and is looking for a wood handler, and you don't have them, just you're out of stock, you don't have them that particular day, but because you went to Kmart that weekend that they have them, you
Mm-hmm.
have a moral obligation to tell that customer that they're down the road at that Kmart.
Yeah.
And then, it's counterintuitive, because I remember I was like 17 years old. I remember asking him,
100
like,
years ago.
why would you do that? He goes, it builds trust. That's what it does, is because if you're willing to tell them the truth, then they'll come back and shop with you forever.
Yep. It's true.
So we have a bunch of questions on interviewing. So I'm going
Mhm.
to group some of these together because some of them are kind of the same. Uh, so we'll just pick this one here. Apart from the candidate sitting in the interview room with
Mhm.
an interview team, how else do you make your office environment, tours, meeting transitions reflect a grateful experience from the moment they walk in the door?
We have kind of a funny experience when you walk in the door that's like a little shocking, but I dig it, which is like you walk in right into the chaos. Like you step off the elevator and you are on the sales floor, and everyone around you on the phone, and everyone's talking, and everyone's walking around and pacing on the phone, and like it's a little overwhelming. But we have our two like office folk up front. We have Carly and we have Julie, and they sit right there by the elevator. So either they're there to say like, "Hey, welcome. Here's your place to sit in the meantime," um, or if they aren't there, because we did not have people to do that for a very long time, someone in the team will always like get up and be like, "Oh, this poor person has obviously lost. Like they do not work at this company yet. Hi, like I'm Jared. What's up? Here's where you can sit. I'll make sure Sally knows you're here. Do you want water?" It's always like do you want water? Do you want coffee? Do you want tea? So on and so forth. That's what you feel when you walk in. But I'm also really fortunate to work for a company where like the energy on the floor is unique. It is very present and it is very loud, and you feel it. So like that I don't have to do, right? Like I mean, I helped do it by helping to hire these people, but they do it just by being who they are and, working the way that they do. And then those other factors are, of course, like if someone's in a room for a little bit because an interviewer's late, like go in and check in on them. Do you want some more water? Do you want a snack? We have little Yappo chocolates that when we're lucky, we remember to give people. But just those little touches combined with the making sure that they meet different people with different purposes and have time on the floor and all that jazz, right? That contributes.
Okay, what are some fun ideas to use and promote internal brand via a collection of employee event photos?
Can you explain to me what that means?
Yeah, not sure. Let's come back to that. I'll ask the
It
question.
might fall into the employer brand stuff, which I know we
Yeah,
have our slide up for.
yeah, that's about when it came in. Let me see if there's any more interview questions here. Um,
And Ryan, I can tackle that while you're looking for that.
yeah, go ahead.
It's usually using Instagram or Facebook. It's showing the culture of the company from the outside to the inside. So, what do you do for people's birthdays? What's the
Oh yeah.
celebration? What do you do? For all of the Hallmark gift card holidays. What do you
What
what
do
do
we
you
do?
do as a company, or do you do? Do you have any special parties? Do you
Of
have
course we
you
do.
know a social events chair? Do you go and see baseball games and things like that? So it's capturing the spirit of what those things on, but it's the visual of letting people know, yeah, we work hard. Like, check, we work
Right.
hard, but we kind of like each other, in some cases love each other, and we hang out and we do some things together. And here are the visual representations of those things that we do together.
We have a lot of those things. And I think, man, like I try to be creative and we get creative with like our recruiting related events that we do. But my sales managers are so creative, some of the stuff that they have our team do. So like just in general, like you can celebrate holidays and holidays you can celebrate with like
Mm,
anything, right? You think there's
that's
a
right.
wide array. You bring in different foods. I really like, I'm such a beer maniac. Like, I want to bring in a brewery to like come and talk about the founding of their brewery and then do like taste tests with their beers. There are fun things like that that you could do for October, right? We're about to do a big event. Uh, okay, I'm okay to say that. It's like part of it's been announced, part of it hasn't. We sponsor a seeing eye dog, and we're going to have a beer pong tournament to raise money for Susan.
Oh,
And
cool.
by sponsoring a seeing eye dog, we are like paying for her to go through her training. And her name is Susan, and she is a black lab, and she is beautiful. And so, like, we're going to have this event where people can pay to be on a beer pong team. And the way that we've been raising money is we have office dogs, and each office dog is a team. And then one of the office dog teams will win. And then whatever team wins, I'm Team Phoebe. If anyone wants to donate to Team Phoebe, the winning team will get to go and actually spend a day where they have all the puppies in training. So a puppy day, which is the best thing
It's
that's ever happened.
it's almost like the quirkiness. It's
Yes.
like let's capture the quirkiness on Instagram or on Facebook and show people we're quirky. We're cool and we work hard and we're smart and sarcastic and all the other things, but we're also quirky.
Yeah.
And you might want to join this quirky tribe, or you might look at this visually and say, I have no interest in being with these quirky people, which I think a great employer brand, which I think I'm in a little bit of a minority here, but I think a great employer brand should repel just as much as it as it brings people to you.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually like the idea that someone would look at your Instagram account and go, "Oh, hell no. There's no way in there's no way in hell I'm going to be joining this firm."
They go to swerve together and get super sweaty and then hold each other for a hugging photo. That's disgusting. I don't want to go to that company. But sorry, that's what we do, right?
They're super cycle and they're all in onesies. No, I think I'm gonna go ahead and opt out of that bit. Done.
Right. But
So,
you need people who are creative, right? Like my hiring managers, I'm sorry, my sales managers had a contest where if you booked a demo or you closed a deal, you could choose whatever manager you wanted and like instruct them to do a certain exercise. And we had barbells and burpees and push-ups and all that stuff. And like then I get to video that happening, right? Or
right.
we had a Smirnoff ice competition yesterday that was really funny. But you have this content if you put the time into creating it, but also it's not just content, right? Like that is an employee experience.
Right.
That is creating an environment where these playful things exist, or these positive things exist, like donating to Knock Knock Give a Sock, like collecting socks for that, or the Susan Project, or we're going to be going to Ronald McDonald House soon, and that's going to be absolutely amazing. But like, you provide these opportunities for your employees to feel fulfilled and to feel like they're part of something. And then you take that content, because you photograph it or you ask people for the photos who were there, and you push that content out into the world. And that's how people understand your brand. You can use a Muse, you can use a built-in NYC, right? You use the Muse to see what my office looks like. Use built-in NYC to see the articles that my employees are a part of, that are very like tailored to us and eloquently written. But if you come to my LinkedIn page, or if you go to the company Twitter or Instagram, that's where you see these photos and these videos of the ongoings that are actually occurring with our people.
That's right.
And that's the closest you can get to understanding what it is if you aren't here.
The worst thing you can do with an employer brand is position yourself on LinkedIn, Facebook. Your company website is very conservative. So buttoned up, Brooks Brothers, Ann Taylor, very, very buttoned up, and then not be that group of people. Be that Office Olympics type group of people where you're playing beer pong every Friday, you're having fun, you're going out and doing different things. Like, the brand drop off needs to be managed, because who you are, whatever it is, whatever that is, and if you really, really are conservative like that, that's great. Be that then, and represent that, and highlight that in video and Instagram and otherwise through the strict narrative in your blog and all that other. But like, be that. But what happens most of the time is people put a very conservative front or veneer on something that's not as conservative behind the veneer, and then people get hired, they get on site, and they find out, oh my God, what did I join? What happened? I thought I was joining, this firm over here, and I'm not, and I didn't. Now, how long do I have to stay before I can get out of this place?
I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah, I was like, Ryan, I heard you.
We've only got a few minutes left, and we got a bunch of questions coming in. So speed round. Let's go 30 seconds, maybe, on some of these responses, and then we can get deeper.
He's talking to you. He's talking to you, Sally.
Yeah.
Any questions we have, we could always respond deeper to you guys through email. All right, so here's one. Some companies are still talking about culture fit. However, with increased dialogue regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion, maybe say equality, diversity, and inclusion, culture ad is fast becoming part of an employer branding mantra. Please comment. 30 seconds, real fast.
Could not agree more. It's a big thing that I'm speaking about with my team too. Helping people to understand that in general, when you like a person or you see them as a culture fit, it's for a very specific reason. It's because they come from the same place as you, or they look like you, or they talk like you. And to make this happen, what you're speaking about, which is a necessary thing to happen, you have to train people to notice when they automatically like people, and train people to notice when they automatically dislike people, and to ask themselves why, and to disprove the conclusion they came to immediately. And then that other side of it is the ad, right? And just explaining to people what that actually means.
Now, it was pay equity, not equality, so I apologize, but
pay equity.
We covered that good. All right, another one came in. What probing questions do you ask a hiring manager when they say culture fit is the reason that the person is rejected? 30 seconds.
They know that's not an okay answer already. So my managers won't, gratefully, my managers won't give me that. And if they do, I'll be like, better, right? So it's just not a reason. It's not an acceptable reason. And if that is your reason, you need to back it up with something along the lines of like, every time they spoke about female colleagues, they did it in a disparaging way, right? There you go. That's a reason that leads you to believe they're not going to get along with female colleagues on the team. Like, that could be culture fit, but it could not be. It's just a matter of making sure that they know it has to be very specific, and something like culture fit just isn't going to fly.
3 examples. Give me 3 examples.
All right. So this is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Just 3 examples. If a hiring manager is so lazy to say culture fit, then it's our job as recruiters to then turn around and say, sounds great, totally understand. Give me 3 legit reasons why. And 3, not 1, not 2, 3. Or because culture fit, all it is a catch-all for why someone doesn't like someone or why they don't fit
Yeah.
a bias that they have and they're not willing to deal with it, their bias.
Or that they don't know they have, right?
Or that they don't know that.
Yeah.
Yep, good point.
All right, we got a yes or no question here. Is it more efficient to have one interviewer per interview, or is it better to have multiple interviewers?
Okay, in a presentation, it's valuable to have more. I do not like interviews with like 2 and 1 or 3 and 1. I think, yeah, there's my short answer. I would say it's valuable in a presentation setting. It is less valuable in what I would say should be a one-on-one.
I think, Ryan, for video interviewing, I like when when multiple people can evaluate one interview. It becomes collaboration software where they can all kind of talk about what they saw, but in one room. I think Sally B's she's already nailed it. But if we're talking about a video interview, which happens more and more these days, I do like the fact of 10 people looking at that same video and coming to some conclusions and then talking about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. What happened to the yes or no answer, guys?
I know, right? I was like, but is it a yes?
Wrong group. Wrong group.
We're working in a people space,
All right. Let's do 3 very quick tips. We have one more question after. We have a bunch, but we're going to choose one more after this. What tips do you? Or no. See what? Oh, sorry. I read it wrong.
It's okay.
What KPIs do you use to measure employer brand? I don't know how I got tips out of that. What KPIs do you use to measure employer brand?
The only one that's measurable is it easier to hire?
Yeah, yes. I also like to keep track of what actually gets a lot of traction. So what I mean by that is most of what I do for our employer branding is via my own LinkedIn, which means I can actually see what receives the most likes, the most shares, the most comments, right? So by taking, I try to learn from that. So an easy thing to say is the things that get the most likes and the most shares and the most attention tend to be promotions and celebrating those. They tend to be dogs. People love dogs. And then the very easy catch-all is anything human. So anything where you actually have human beings doing a certain thing or celebrating together gets a lot of traction. A picture of a notebook or a picture of really cool Yacht Post swag gets nothing. Articles get very little. That's how I gauge. I'm sorry, that doesn't give you 3 easy KPIs, but brand awareness is hard to put those specific KPIs on. You can see the numbers and track that and track trends. And then on a human level, I try to pay really close attention to how often people speak to me about things I've posted in our interview. So are they bringing up things that they've seen on my LinkedIn? Are they bringing up things they've read on Built-in NYC, on the Muse, and keeping track of that?
Okay, good. So we are at the top of the hour. We have another question that came in, Rebecca. I've got to cut it here, but I will have either Sally or Tincup get back to you and answer that for you. I promise. It's going to just be a longer answer than we can answer right now.
Sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah, we all talk too long. Anyhow, guys, thank you so much. This has been a really great webinar. A ton of people, ton of questions. So we'll get the slides, we'll get the recordings out to everybody. We'll have this up on the site very soon. So check your emails. You will be getting some stuff from us. Thank you again to the team over at Greenhouse for making this all possible. And we will talk to everybody soon.
Thanks, Sally.